Here I am in the middle of the night. I get pulled out of my body, and it's more like Star Wars. I felt like I was just being tumbled through space. It was just darkness, but the sense of traveling at high speed through space. It's a kind of a weird description. And it was just black. So I didn't see anything. There was no tunnel. I didn't see a tunnel. It was just like tumbling through darkness. And then I get to this space.
Thank you, Dr. Lade, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to
You're,
our conversation.
Me too. You're welcome. Before we get into talking about the different topics today, can you go through a little bit about your background and you had two near-death experiences, so can you go through those real quick?
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of a background too. I was raised in Scandinavia, in Northern Europe, and I had no beliefs whatsoever before my near-death experiences. I was a complete atheist. I thought you die, it's black, you're gone. And I was confirmed when I was 14. Everybody back then in the 1960s, when I grew up, the church and the state were not yet separated. So if you were born in the country of Sweden, you were a Lutheran. And if you didn't want to be a Lutheran, you had to tell the church. And when you needed a passport, you actually went to the church to get your passport. And then, it
Hmm.
got all separated in the 1970s. So that's how I grew up. I married an American and moved to the United States when I was 21, became a US citizen, and ended up going to college here. And I worked for IBM in my youth. My first job out of college, I was a programmer and a systems analyst. So talk
Wow.
about methodical. And I had always wanted to be a healer, but back then in 1960s and early 1970s, when I went to high school, if you wanted to major in science, those we do the prereqs for med school in high school, and then we go straight to medical school after high school. So I was really good in those subjects, and my teachers all said, "Oh, you should to do the science line. You should be a doctor or a nurse, right?" And there were no girls back then. The only girl that I knew that was going to do that science line was, more nerdy, more serious. And I wanted to make sure I had friends. You're a teenager, you wanted to make sure you had a boyfriend. And so it just like turned me away from that. And I ended up majoring in languages and business in high school. But it wasn't what my heart wanted. It was more, I want to be part of the group. I want to have friends in school. It was just a different era. And then when I moved to the States, I again thought maybe I should, study the sciences and become a doctor or a nurse. But the language barrier was so great that I was so afraid of going that route and not being able to understand anything. I mean, as it was, I was walking around with a dictionary under my arm. And there were times in school where I ended up majoring in business and computer science because that would be easier. And I would write down my homework literally phonetically because sometimes I didn't even understand what the teacher said. And then I would come home and ask my husband, and I said, we're supposed to do this for the homework and say it in English because I had written it down phonetically. And he would say, "Yeah, what's the problem?" And I'm like, "I don't know what I'm saying. What does this mean?" So, it took me probably like 2 or 3 years to really get a good command of the language. And then I worked for IBM. And then after working there for a couple of years, I had my first child. And then we ended up, through my husband's job to be moved, I was working in New York. We got moved to California. And I was on a leave of absence. So I continued my leave of absence. I went back for 6 months, but it was very difficult with the childcare and finding people. It was just a nightmare. And then we ended up being transferred to California. And so I ended up eventually leaving IBM because I couldn't be on a leave of absence forever. So I left that and I said, "No, I'm pregnant with my second child. There's just no point, and I'm just going to have to leave for now." And I had my second child, and then I had my third child. And this is when everything, my whole life got turned upside down. So I already had two boys that were 6 and 3.5. And then I was giving birth to my daughter. And I gave birth in Anaheim, which is, if anybody who's been to Disneyland knows that
Mhm.
Disneyland is in Anaheim. And I gave birth on the eastern part of Anaheim. So it kind of borders the desert. And as I gave birth, we had an earthquake, and it was a 7.4 earthquake. It was one of the biggest earthquakes in California, but it
Oh my
wasn't
God.
it wasn't that much damage because this epicenter was in the desert, and we were literally, one of the first buildings close to the desert because it was on the outskirts of Anaheim. And this hospital was built on rollers. And so this hospital is rolling back and forth. Everything is levitating. All the instruments, on the little metal trays are literally bouncing up and down on the trays, clanging. And we lost all the power in the hospital. They're leaning over me on the table where I'm getting ready to give birth. My contractions were about 3 minutes apart. And if they hadn't leaned over me, they were holding on so they wouldn't fall over. And I would literally have fallen off the bed if they didn't lean over me. And it was one of those moments in my life when I thought I was going to die. And a lot of us have had these experiences. Somebody cuts you off in traffic, and it's almost like your life flashes before you, and you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, this is it. I'm going to die."
Mm.
And then miraculously, by a quarter of an inch, they miss you, and your heart is pounding for 10 minutes. It was that kind of experience. And so we lost all the power. The earthquake stopped, and so did my labor. So it took like another half hour for the labor to come kick back in. Because if you are about to be eaten by a tiger in the jungle, you are going to stop giving birth and get yourself to safety, right? Especially, not if you're in the middle maybe of giving the birth, but I was getting close to giving birth. My contractions were 3 minutes apart. And then it can just stop for a while to make sure you can get yourself to safety, and then it picks back up again. So I gave birth to my daughter, and we get the aftershock of a 7.2 earthquake,
Oh
and
God.
they eventually give me the baby to hold. So I get the baby, finally get to hold her, and I have this severe abdominal cramps, and I'm just arching backwards on the table, yelling for my husband, take the baby," because I couldn't even hold her. I was in so much pain. And that was the first time I hemorrhaged. And so we had, like a mountain of blood clots. I'm going to say like the size of a soccer ball. I mean, it was they were massaging my uterus and getting all the blood clots out. And we didn't have any electricity, right? So we're running on generators. We have the light of a night light in this birthing unit in the hospital. So they put me on IV drip, and they keep me in the hospital an extra day. And then I get sent home. And then I have all this like pain. It felt like if you swallowed a bowling ball and it's sitting in your stomach, because it was this cramping going down on the inside of my legs, and everything just felt really heavy. I couldn't figure out why, because this was my third birth. It was a natural birth.
Mm.
And I had done, it was my third time. So I'm like, why is it so different this time? And anyway, then it's 10 days later. It was a Wednesday. It was a Wednesday, July 8th, because I gave birth on June 28th. And my friends have a baby shower for me in the park. So I go to the park, and everybody's really excited because I have two boys and I have a girl, and everybody wanted to give me something girly for the girl. And I end up using the restroom, and this just enormous blood clot comes out. You look in the toilet and you're almost passing out because you can see how much blood that is. So I take my kids, I run back to my friend, and I said, "I have to go right now. I don't know what's happening. Something is really wrong." And all this blood came out. So I drive home, which is just, 2 blocks away from the park. My parents are visiting from Sweden to help with the kids. They call my husband. We go to the ER. And as I'm in the ER, they come in and they say, "What happened?" I told them. And they do a manual visual inspection, and they say, "It's just a trickle of blood right now. And sometimes it can happen that you have a second lining that comes out." And it was probably just a second lining. And you seem, healthy otherwise. I was 34. We lived in California. It was June. I was tan. I mean, I had never been sick before. Why would something be wrong, right? So they sent me on my way. There's no lab work. There's no ultrasound. There's nothing.
Mm.
The next evening, same thing happens again. We call the hospital, and I'm yelling to my husband because it's like 9:30 at night. I am not going. They're not going to do anything. It was, again, one huge blood clot, but then it stopped. So they said, "All right, we're just going to have you see the doctor tomorrow morning." So Friday morning, 10 o'clock, we go see the doctor. I tell him this is what has happened twice now. And he does the same thing. "Well, doesn't seem like there's a lot of bleeding going on right now. It could have been a second lining again. Sometimes the two of these can come out." I'm like, "Okay, well, how am I supposed to know?" Right? they're the doctor. So they sent me on my way. Again, no lab tests, no nothing else was done except the visual inspection. The same thing happens again Friday afternoon, like around 3:30 or 4. So we say, well, I mean, obviously something is wrong. Now it's been 3 times. So we go back to the ER. And again, a visual inspection, they come in and they say, well, there isn't much bleeding happening right now, so we'll just keep you for observation. And they close the door. I'm lying on this table. I don't even have like a buzzer to ring or anything. It's 1992. So I don't know if they just, I don't know. It was, I guess, different then than it is now. So I'm lying on this table and I start bleeding again. And I'm thinking, oh, thanks. I am finally bleeding in the right spot. I'm in the ER and I'm bleeding. And I didn't think much of it because I mean, this was the fourth time I have been bleeding. And it wasn't like one of those big blood clots. It was just more like a heavy flow. So then this nurse comes to check on me. I'm going to say this is the divine intervention of if she had come 2 minutes later, I might not be here today because I would just have passed out on the table. Right. So
Right.
she opens the door. She sees the pool of blood, and the look on her face, nightmares for years because the terror on her face, and just staring at me and saying, oh, oh my gosh, like and I can hear the call on the loudspeaker, OBGYN stat to the ER, OBGYN stat to the ER. I'm like really, panic, like now, you can hear it in the voice. She quickly cleans up the bloody papers, puts down new papers, and this middle-aged physician comes running in full speed with another younger physician in tow. And he says, what happened? I told him, look, this is the fourth time now. This has been going on since Wednesday. It's not Friday. And he said, all right, let's take a look. And as they're again doing a manual inspection to see if they can see, what's happening, again, this enormous blood clot comes out. So at this point, I try to sit up and tell him, I'm not feeling too good because now I've lost quite a bit of blood. This was the fifth time I hemorrhaged in 3 days. So he knows what's going on at this point because he can see the size of that blood clot. So he just pushes me down on the table. And at this point, I can't keep my eyes open any longer. So my eyes are closed and I can hear the room filling with people, everybody giving orders. And I have a nurse on my right and she's got my blood, putting on my blood pressure cuff. And I have a nurse on my left that's trying to place an IV. And now often they place an IV when you go to the ER, and people sometimes I've had patients say, I don't know why they placed an IV. I'm like, oh, I'll be happy they did because they don't know. You look fine, right? I
Mhm.
looked like the picture of health. They didn't think that something could be so wrong, right? Because you can't judge what's going on inside someone by just looking at how they look because you might look just fine until that 1 minute before you go into shock. So, it's good that they place an IV because now they have access to inject medications because when you go into shock, your vein starts collapsing, right?
Mhm.
So it
Yeah.
makes it much, much harder to access those veins. So I'm lying on the table and I feel like I jumped out of an airplane without a parachute. I feel like I'm just falling. And it's probably my blood pressure that's just crashing at this point. And I can hear the nurse on my right, and she yells out, 50 over 15, hurry. And that's my blood pressure. So now we're below supporting a heartbeat. So, and I just keep falling. And it's shortly after she yells this, I know that I'm dying. And it's such a different experience than the thought that I was going to die during those earthquakes when I was giving birth. Because many of us have had that, I think I'm going, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. But in this instance, I knew that I was dying. It was a very different experience. So I know I'm dying and I'm lying on this table and like the atheist that I am, I know I'm dying and all I can hope for is that anything they told me when I was 14, when I was confirmed, that there would be any kind of truth to that. So what do? I pray to God to save my life. And I say, God, please let me live. I have 3 children under the age of 6. They need a mother. And it was shortly after that I just got pulled out of my body. And the interesting part is that when I got pulled out of my body, the first thought, right? You're thinking now, but you are. My first thought was, how can I be outside my body and still be me? How does this
Mhm.
work? Right? Because I didn't have a belief system that supported this. So here I am in this limbo state. My body is down on the table. I'm in limbo, but in this state, there's no worries. It's just like peace, unconditional love and peace. And I wasn't even worried about getting back to my body. It was more, wait a second, how does this work? What my body is down there and I'm out here, right? That worry that I had, oh my gosh, my children are going to be left alone. And, it wasn't like that anymore. I was just at peace being in this state. But I also knew that there was no time on this side and that I somehow had access to past, present, and future all at the same time. It was like time didn't matter. Like time is inconsequential and on the other plane. It doesn't matter. It's everything is all one on the other side. And I know I belong to that body down there. And, it was shortly after this that I just get pulled back into my body. And again, people say, do you know if you left through your crown chakra or your heart chakra? No, I have no idea because it happens. It's just a split second where 1 second you're inside your body, the next second you're not. It happens so quickly. It's instantaneous. It's not like I'm going to step out and I'm going to, like a cartoon, swish out of my crown chakra slowly. I don't know. Maybe people have had that experience, but for me, it was just instantaneous. I was either inside my body or outside my body. So I get pulled back in to my body. And then as I'm in the hospital, so then the doctor says, which is important for the second ND, he says, okay, we have to give you blood, blah, blah, blah. And I've tried to even just turn my head a little bit to look at him, and he's just yelling at me like, "Don't move!" Like any movement, like don't move your head, don't move your fingers, don't move, because he was so afraid I was just going to go back into shock. And he said, "We're going to give you blood." And I said, Do you have to give me blood?" Because it was during the AIDS epidemic where there was a lot of
Mm.
people that were given blood transfusion that then ended up with AIDS, 6 years later. And I said, I have 3 kids under the age of 6, and I want to make sure I don't get AIDS. Obviously, if you have to give me blood, give me blood. And he said, well, you are otherwise a very healthy person. So we're just going to monitor you and see how quickly you make blood. If there's a way we can avoid it, we will. So the next morning, as I'm lying in the hospital bed, I I'm number one, I'm pondering what happened the day before. Like, how can this be? How can I leave my body and still be me? Right? It's not supposed to happen because my belief system was that this could not happen. And then I hear my sister-in-law speaking to me, and she's in the left corner of in my ceiling, and she had passed away about 2 weeks earlier, and she was in her 40s. She had lung cancer, and I can hear her, and she says, "Everything is going to be okay." And I'm thinking, yesterday I thought I was outside I know I was outside my body, and now I think I hear my sister-in-law like, what is happening? And I can't. My biggest fear was if I tell someone, they're going to think I'm crazy and they're going to lock me up in the psych ward, and I'll never see my kids again. I know I'm not crazy, but I also know if I tell the story of what happened, they might think I'm crazy, right? So then
Mm.
this nurse comes in to check on me, and she says, did anything unusual happen in the ER yesterday? And I laugh at that now because obviously she knew everything about near-death experiences. Maybe she was even there, or she heard about what had happened, and she figured I might have had an experience. But I was so petrified. I said, "No, no, nothing happened." Like it was just, this is they saved me basically, and I left it there because I was so afraid. And then I pretty much slept for, 2 months because they would send me home. We didn't do the blood transfusion. They sent me home with supplements and medications and who knows what. And I know my parents stayed like an extra month or a month and a half. They didn't go back to Sweden, I think, until August sometime. And then my mother-in-law came and she helped. So I had help until September because I mostly slept in the beginning. I had no blood in my body. So my hands and feet were ice cold in Huntington Beach in California in July. So, I'm under wool blankets. I can't keep my head on a pillow. I can't walk from the bedroom to the living room without passing out. So by the time, I've taken that 20th step to get to the next room, I literally had to throw myself on the sofa because I was passing out because I had so little blood in my body. And so they told me, you're not going to feel too good for a couple of months, but you are making blood. So we're going to, send you home with all these different meds. So then my mother-in-law came and she said, what happened? What happened in the ER? So I tell her the story, how I left my body. And she said, oh, what happened was that you had something called a near-death experience. And I'm like, what's a near-death experience? Because I didn't know anything about it. And she went out and she bought me the book, Life After Life by Raymond Moody. And so I read that, during the summer. And after reading that, I started to understand, okay, this is some kind of spiritual experience that can happen to people when they're really close to death. They're either dead or they're very close to death. So then, it took me until Christmas. So 6 months later, I took my kids to the grocery store to buy a gallon of milk and ice cream. And they were so excited because we actually went somewhere because I've been sitting in a rocking chair basically for 6 months. And that was almost tipped me over the edge. It took everything I had to not pass out. But, 6 months later, then we all get the flu at Christmas and we all get pneumonia. We go to a walk-in clinic and we have no medical insurance because my husband's company got bought. And so we couldn't afford to pay Cobra for a family, of five with three kids. It was just too much money. And we're in our early 30s. So we said, all right, well, we don't want to keep that insurance and go to that hospital anyway. And obviously, I'm doing well, I'm healing, but it's going to take time. But they told me it was going to take time. So we have no insurance. And it turns out we don't have insurance until the following July. So we have no insurance this whole year because my husband would just take the first job to get an income. And then we were just about to get insurance. And then he would say, I'm offered this other job. It has better pay, blah, blah, blah. Should I take it or do we just stay here and get the insurance? And I said, no, take the job, keep getting the better job. I'm getting better. I mean, it's a slow journey, but they told me it was going to be slow. So that's we ended up not having insurance the whole year. So we go to this walk-in clinic at Christmas and we all get antibiotics, inhalers, and the works. Everybody, 8 days later, everybody's well except for me. I'm literally worse. So I go back to the walk-in clinic and they're like, weren't you just here? And I said, yes. And they're, why are you so sick? Like, you're 34 years old. You shouldn't be this sick. And they said, okay, we're going to take your blood and we're going to do a quick blood test to see what your immune system is doing. So they come back in the room and they say, do you have leukemia or AIDS? Because you have no immune system whatsoever. And that's why you're so sick. So
Mm.
I said, well, I don't think I have AIDS because I didn't do the blood transfusion. I tell them what happened, and it's been this long journey. I'm finally to the point where I could drive myself and go to the walk-in clinic, which 6 months earlier would have been impossible. So they say, well, you have to go to the ER because you're way too sick. You can literally die. You have no immune system, and you're way, way, way too sick. And I said, look, I don't have insurance and I'm not going to go to the ER unless literally I'm dying. So just give me the medication and, send me on my way. And they called the next day and checked in. And I said, well, I'm actually a little bit better. So the new medication and whatever they gave me, I have no idea, worked. And so slowly but surely, I recovered. Well, so then fast forward to March, I started bruising and I would get bruises from just like bumping into things and I would bruise really easily. And by May, I bumped into the changing table, which would give you a bruise about the size of a nickel or a dime, right? Just a tiny little bruise on your hip. My entire hip was completely red and purple from this little bump in. So
Mm.
obviously there was a problem with the platelets, right? I wasn't clotting correctly. And I was getting really sick. Like I was getting pneumonia. I had a terrible deep cough. My friends came over. One of my friends were crying. She's like, you're going to die. You have, something is really wrong with your blood. You have to go to the doctor. So I go to the doctor. He sees the bruise on my hip and thinks my husband is beating us. So I tell him, no, this is what happened to me. And I'm telling you the truth. And I had all my kids with me because I got in on, like, oh, you can come today. We have an opening. And I didn't have anybody a friend that could come over and watch my kids. So I had to bring the kids with me. And, there was just no time to arrange for anything. So I just bring my kids with me. And he looks at all my kids. He rips the t-shirt off my kids. And I'm like, look, I'm telling you the truth. Nobody is hurting us. This is what happened. And he said, well, you're way too sick. And, we need to run labs on you and you need to go to the ER and the whole story again. So I told him, I said, look, I have been, I drove myself here today. I even took my children with me. I am obviously getting better. And yes, do I understand that something is really wrong with my blood? Yes. My father was a physician. I heard all the stories growing up. And we're going to get insurance July 1st, and it's now mid-May. I got 6 weeks to go, and I'm doing better than I have all year. So he gave me all the labs, of course, to run, and which I never did. And again, I managed to recover. So I lived this a crazy way for years, So now for the next year, so my second NDE happened, 2 years later. So this is my state of existence now. If I put my knee on the floor to tie my children's shoes, I will get a bruise on my knee. If I pick two plates out of the dishwasher at the same time, my whole finger will turn blue. Any little bump in, I'm gonna get bruises. I'm constant. My head is always pounding if I, stand up or bend over because I have too little blood in my body, right? Because so now we know I probably had what's called a bone marrow suppression because my body wasn't making enough blood, like it wasn't making enough platelets or white blood cells or red blood cells. So it was a complete suppression in the bone marrow. It's called idiopathic aplastic anemia. And so it's a bone marrow suppression. Which makes sense because, and that's what my doctor told me before I went to med school. And then I went to med school and I'm like, yeah, that he was right. That's what it was because all the symptoms match. But you can get that. You can get idiopathic aplastic anemia even if you didn't have a complication, you just gave birth. So that's why it's called idiopathic because nobody knows why you get it. But,
Mm.
obviously my whole system was turned on and off. And so it's not a surprise that something like that happened. So during the second year, I'm living in this state and I can't stand up to cook my children's food. So I have to sit on a stool at the stove in order to make them pancakes. And it's during this time, and I often woke up in the middle of the night and my head would pound and I'd take my head off the pillow, trying to get more blood to my head and my heart. So the second NDE happens in the middle of the night. I wake up just like I often do with a head pounding, take my head off the pillow. And then again, as in a split second, I'm outside my body. And I always laugh at, the second experience. Like I didn't get the full effect the first time. So we had to have the second experience, or maybe I had to process my first experience first because, the second experience, if I had the second experience first, I would probably have thought I was crazy. But now it's been 2 years and I've been pondering this and I'm hearing the spirit world and all these things are coming forward, right? I'm becoming very intuitive and I hear voices and I hear the spirit world for 2 years. And so here I am in the middle of the night. I get pulled out of my body, and it's like it's more like Star Wars. I felt like I was just being tumbled through space. It was just darkness, but the sense of traveling at high speed through space. It's a kind of a weird description. And it was just black. So I didn't see anything. There was no tunnel. I didn't see a tunnel. It was just like tumbling through darkness. And then I get to this space, and I call it the mid station because it was as if I was aware that there were like levels or like floors below me, or,
Mm.
think of going into a skyscraper. You push a button on the 50th floor, but it's 100 floors in this skyscraper. And when you get off on the 50th floor, there's floors above you, there's floors below you. You don't know what's on those floors because you're on the 50th floor, right? And it was that kind of a sensation. And I get to this place and I hear the most beautiful music. It still haunts me to this day. It's like 31 years later. And it's the most beautiful music. You cannot make this music on the earth plane. I tried. I sat at the synthesizer for a week trying to recreate the music I had heard. But there was not, I think there was over 200 sounds on this synthesizer. And there was not one sound that sounded as beautiful as the music I heard.
Mm.
And so I I'm wondering where is this beautiful music coming from? So I look to my right and I see this little like a wooden log cabin. It literally looks like a sauna, like a Swedish or Finnish sauna, like a little tiny log cabin. And I open the door and I look inside, but it's empty. So I was like, wow, that's so strange. Where is the music coming from? I look to the left and you don't have a body. I'm just an entity, like turning in space. And I open the door on this cabin on the left. I'm like, wow, it's empty. Where is this music coming from? But then I become aware of this light, this imagine the brightest, whitest light that is shining through the thickest, whitest fog, because it's that feeling of, if you're in a really dense fog, the fog sort of wraps around you. You're like standing in the fog, you're surrounded by it. And it was that kind of a feeling. You're surrounded by the brightest, whitest light you can imagine. And as I'm turning around into this light, there is an outline of angels. Okay. But I'm also very aware of the fact that I don't believe in angels. So, what do I get to see? Angels that I don't believe in. And the music is coming from the angels. I don't see, people have asked me, did you see faces? No, I saw the wings and the outline of the angels. So, it's like the silhouette of angels in the white light. But I'm also aware that this light is source, and I don't care what you call it. I call it source because if I say God, then we get stuck in certain religions, and I don't believe that that is how it is. I think source is the creator, or whatever you want to call. So I call it source. But this light is just pure unconditional love. It is, you are part of source. And we carry that light within us. We're part of source. We are connected to source. When we, go back to the heavens, we receive this unconditional love, the unconditional love and light. And we're part of that. And and then I become aware of two, I call them spirit guides. They're like light beings or spirit guides. I don't know, what to call them, but they talk to each other. And the one on my right says to the other one, "What is she doing here? She can't be here. She has to go back," as if there's some kind of a time limit. Like you can only be outside your body for 33 seconds or something. And then the other spirit guide, I say, no, 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 wait a second. Like, how can I be outside my body and still be me? How does this work? Because it's been 2 years now and I'm still trying to figure out this is not supposed to be this way because it's not my belief system, right? I'm still struggling to change my own belief system. So the spirit guide says, well, if I told you, you wouldn't remember, but you will remember this. And then it's like all of a sudden, it's like I'm standing on the moon and I'm looking down on the earth from space, from outer space. But around the earth, there is what I call the silvery, glittery fishnet because it's this diamond shaped, silvery, glittery net. But now we can just Google it. We can Google grid around the earth. And you're going to see something that looks very similar to what I saw. But again, this is 1994, so we don't have Google yet. We don't have the internet. It hasn't come that far yet. So you can't Google it. And so I called it the silvery glittery fishnet because I grew up in Sweden and there's like, 25,000 islands outside Stockholm in the capital. And so in the summers, we would spend time in the archipelago and I would row the little boat for my grandmother as she laid nets in the ocean to catch fish. And when she lifted these nets out in the early morning sun, those little water, a fishnet has that diamond shape. And the little water droplets on the fishnet would sparkle in the morning sunlight. So to me, that was my best description. It looks like a fishnet, a sparkling fishnet around the earth. And the guide says, everything on earth is connected to each other. And everything on earth is connected up to this grid. And with that information, I got sent back. And that, has followed me through life. And it is literally my biggest work today, which is ancestral healing. And it is that interconnectedness because when you study ancestral healing and you work with it, you can see the connection. And we literally are all connected. It's absolutely true because when we change and we heal ourselves, it creates a ripple effect through the family and through the spirit world. And it creates healing for all the people involved, not just yourself. And we really truly are, connected to each other. And then I'm going to let you ask some questions. But then there was a lot of guidance in the spirit world talking to me. I had electrical interference, a lot of things that happened. And it took me 12 years to really start to trust in that intuitive guidance.
Right. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing all that. Definitely amazing journey. Um, so kind of want to talk a little bit about that because a lot of it kind of related to me. I had a near-death experience, and so a lot of it makes sense to me. The the blackness, the light, the angels. I didn't have any of the belief systems either,
Mhm.
but it was shown to me, you know. So I kind of understand that. I did have also a like a yogic experience. I was doing yoga and in
Mhm.
Vinasa, where you're laying on
Mhm.
the floor and
Mhm.
you're just relaxing after your yoga session. There was a white orb that
Mhm.
was hovering over my body, and I went to go reach it. And then I went into the orb. It was
Mhm.
just light. It was a light consciousness. And then I
Mhm.
realized I was like, kind of like you in
Mhm.
that scenario. I'm out of the body. I'm like, what am I doing out of the body? And it was like, oh no, I'm not supposed to be out of the body. It's like this knowing knew
Mhm.
that you're not supposed to be out of the body. So it's not like somebody forcing me or telling me I have to go back. But the minute I had that awareness, I went back into the body. I was drafted back in. So that
Right.
was really interesting. Were you aware when you were out of the body, like if it was like an orb or a light, or I know we don't have the body anymore, the physical body, but were you aware of what you were?
No, just like without a body. I was me without a body. Just,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah,
I didn't see myself or anything. I just knew there was no body. It was just my soul, just the energy of the soul, or, yeah.
yeah, it's really interesting.
Hmm.
And then, because orbs have been coming up a lot lately for me, and kind of interesting because like the interview that I was talking with before with Aaron, and he was saying he got to see what source looked like. And it was like this light with all these little orbs, lights of consciousness
Hmm.
attached to it. And I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, this is kind of, helping me to put two and two together and make sense of it. So it's very interesting journey. Um, but yeah, and then with the near death experience, did you experience anything else, or that was pretty much just it from the other side? Like, did you get any like other knowledge, or did that come after as you went on your journey?
Yeah, I'm gonna say so that what happened next was just more intuitive knowings. I would know when people were sick in the family. There were so many things that happened. So if we fast forward, well, let me tell you about the electrical interference because that's kind of a funny thing too. So my watch died right away as I'm sitting in the rocking chair. I'm like 3 months out. I'm now on my own. My parents have gone home. My mother-in-law went home after the first experience, and my watch dies after just like wearing it for a week. I'm trying to see what time it is. We didn't have cell phones then, so we actually wore watches, and it died. So I said, "Wow, that's such a bummer. My watch died." And it took me until the following spring. It was, I think, March or April when I could actually drive myself to a store and go to it. Like here on the West Coast, we have Target. I think on the East Coast, you have Caldors, kind of the same thing. And the watch department is typically right inside. And so I time it. I go in the morning. I have to bring my kids with me. And I just have enough strength to walk in, pick out a watch quickly, check out, and go back to the car. I mean, it had to be, within 5 minutes. I wear the watch for a week and it stops. And I'm so disappointed because it was so much effort for me to get the watch, right? So I was like, wow, I can't believe it. So I'm going to have to return it and get another one. So I bring it back and I say, I don't know, it stopped. And they said, wow, that's so weird. Well, go pick out another one. So I get the same watch again. It's like a Timex or something. And I wear it for a week and it stops. I'm like, what? Why? This must be really poor quality control. Coming out, being a business major as an undergraduate, and I worked for an operations management professor. I was doing work study. So my mind goes straight to, oh, it's poor quality control in the manufacturing plant. So I bring the watch back. I talk to the ladies and I say, I don't know, this watch stopped. And she said, wow, that's so strange. We haven't gotten any other watches back. So I said, I don't know. It must be poor quality control in the manufacturing plant, but I'll pick a different brand this time. So I go and I pick out a different watch, different brand. I wear it for a week. It stops. So then my best friend was coming over and helping with laundry and my dishes because I was, still so weak. And I tell her the story and she just starts laughing and she says, it's not the watches, it's you, honey. You're the one stopping the watches. So I said, what do you mean? And and then all these other things started to, happened too. So I couldn't turn on or off the VCR for the kids. So I would have to stand in the doorway and I would have to instruct my 6 year old, no, not that button, the one with the triangle, push that one. Because if I did it, it just wouldn't work. It just wouldn't start. So all these weird things happen. And then it was, a year later, like that May, June timeframe, I walked by the television and the television turned on. And I was like, the kids. Okay. So my son is now, I got a 4.5-year-old boy and a 7-year-old boy. And I said, oh, they got the clicker. They're playing a trick on mama. So I looked down at the table, but the clicker's right there. My kids are playing right outside. We were had in an apartment that had like a courtyard. So the moms, we all had the door open and we could see the kids. They were like playing right outside, either outside my door, outside the neighbor's door, right? So I look up, my kids are right there. They're playing with their friends. And I said, wow, somebody else must have the same television I do. So I went to ring like 7 people's doorbells that lived in this apartment complex. And they were either not home because they were at work, or they said, no, no, I'm not watching TV. Because I'm thinking somebody missed, they tried to turn on their TV. The signal went through my window, turned on my TV. No, nobody was watching TV. So I go back into our little apartment and I walk by the television, it turns back on. So now I'm thinking, okay, I get it. Like VCR doesn't work, the watches don't work. Now I'm turning on the television. And once the vacuum cleaner turned on, a brand new vacuum, we had a brand new vacuum cleaner, and I was helping my 5-year-old zip his jacket, because it was like this zipper was stuck. And as I'm doing that, the vacuum cleaner is plugged in. It's on the other side of the room. The vacuum starts, and my almost 5-year-old says, "Mom, the vacuum cleaner started on its own." I was like, I don't know, must be the electrical wiring. And like every time when I was lying down to read stories to my kids, the light next to whatever child's bed I was lying next to, the light would flicker, right? So it would flicker on and off.
Mm.
And every night they would say, why does the light always flicker when you read stories, Mom, but not when Dad reads stories? I said, I don't know. It must be something with the electrical wiring, right? But now we know that these are common after effects or side effects of people that have a near-death experience. And they've done all that research and they say it's actually quite common. So I'm happy for all the people that have near-death experiences now, because there's so much more information than it was, back when I had mine. And it was, I had to go to the library and search for books. And I searched for years for anything that could tell me what that grid was that I had seen. And I gave up around like 2004 or so. I gave up. I'm going to say in the early 2000s, we lived in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I would be at the San Francisco Public Library searching for books. I had stacks of books next to my bed. Anything that could tell me, what was it that I experienced. And I couldn't find anything, probably because I was in the wrong department, you know, uh, trying to find information. And then I just said, forget it. And it wasn't until I'm going to say 2014, I think, when I told my daughter the whole story about seeing the grid. And I was just, I'm not going to tell people, they're going to think I'm crazy. And she laughs and she looks at me and she goes, Mom, you can Google that. You can Google grid around the earth. And I was like, oh my goodness, the internet have come that far. And then and then this whole wave of sharing near death experiences also. I think the first time I shared my experience was with IANS, International Association for Near Death
Mm.
Studies, back in 2017. And then I started, I was out of med school and I said, well, everybody's starting to share it, so I don't feel so crazy anymore. And this is information that we need to get out there to help all the people that are going to have this experience, because the more we know about it, when you think about how many people's lives we save every single day, but people are so afraid if they have an experience, they're afraid of sharing it, just like I was, because if they don't have that belief system, people are going to think they're crazy. And
Mm.
it's so good for this information to come out, because so many people that have not had a near-death experience might have one later on in life, or they'll know somebody who has one, and then they can help themselves or help those other people.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting that a lot of people will be affected by electronics or something afterwards. I don't really remember. I'm trying to think back if that really happened to me. It probably didn't. I just didn't really like the
Yeah.
connection. But one thing I do remember is a lot of people would come to me and just start telling me like their whole life story. It was like
Mm-hmm.
they were unloading their
Mm-hmm.
information, and it was like a healing that they were going through. It was really interesting. And then my after my near death experience with the angel told me to go into psychology. So I went into psychology for
Mm-hmm.
my degree. And I was like, okay, this makes sense now, because that's my direction. And
Mm-hmm.
so with that, I kind of wanted to go into the healing journey because you do healing. I went on a 10-year spree of healing myself. A lot of that I found to be the mother, the father wound. Looking at
Mm-hmm.
my ancestral line, the family tree.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I didn't really understand why I was doing it, but as I was doing it, it started, to make
Mm-hmm.
sense. So, can you talk a little bit about the healing journey, the
Mm-hmm.
mother wound?
Yeah. Yeah. So it was 2004 and I finally declared myself well. And I was looking on a website to see, I wanted to go back to work because my kids were teenagers. And I knew I needed to be in healing. And I found this, website and it said naturopathic medicine. And I was like, wow, that is so cool because my body was so sensitive and I had to use a lot of alternative ways to create healing for myself. It took 12 years to before I could say I'm well. Like my life is moving forward now. And I saw that it was a real medical school, and I said, I can't do that. I am in my mid 40s now, and even if I did all the prereqs, there's no guarantee that would take me. I'm older, and I closed the computer. I said, I'll look again tomorrow, and I go to get to the kitchen, and the spirit world says, no, you have to become a naturopathic doctor. Obviously, it's still my choice, right? We have free will. But they said, no, you should become a naturopathic doctor. You're to bring messages and healing to the people. You're to combine East and West or old and new. And you're to write two books. No, wait, three. And I said, what do you mean writing books? Write about what? Well, I never thought I was going to write a book, right? And they said, when the time is right, we will let you know. And so they said, just focus on getting your degree. And so literally within 2 weeks, I was enrolled in the prereqs. And then I went to medical school when I was 54, and that was in 2012. And as I was in med school, it seemed like the only message I would ever get would be finish your degree and everything as it should be. I'm like, no, it's not as it should be. Like, because, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing this? Blah, blah, blah. And they were just, no, focus on your degree, get out of school, get your degree. And then as soon as I got out of school, I was waiting for my license. I had taken my boards and I met this woman, and it turned out she was a medium. And she said, somebody's here and they want to give you a message. And it was my mom. And she said, you have to go to Arthur Findlay College to study mediumship. And I said, I'm like in a residency. I don't even know if they're going to let me take a week off. I'm the bottom of the totem pole. So the information kept coming. And so finally, I just said, fine, I will go to Arthur Findlay College. I don't know how this is all going to happen, but I understand that it's something I'm supposed to do. And 6 months later, I was at Arthur Findlay College and I started studying mediumship and, went back and forth several times. Within like 2 years, I was like there, 5 times or something. It was ping pong, find super cheap tickets in the middle of the winter so I could fly over. And then, I quickly became a medium because I also understood the teacher said, you're not here to become famous. You're not one of those people that want to be the person that's standing on stage, be the famous medium, making money. You are a born medium. You were born as a medium and you came to Earth. And I mean, now I know that they're absolutely correct. And they said, don't you remember blah, 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 when you saw this as a child? I'm like, oh, yeah, I do remember that. Right. And it all made sense. And it is the integration. I now understand that the integration, I needed to go to medical school because I'm here to work spiritually, right? So I work as a medical intuitive or a medical medium. I don't care what you call it, because I work intuitively and I work with my spirit guides. So it's kind of I work both ways because I tune into your body and I feel things, and I talk to the spirit guides. And sometimes the spirit guides will say, I'll hear a diagnosis, right? And then I'll say, this is what I keep hearing. And do you have these symptoms that go along with this disease? And they're talking about their allergies. And then they just stare at me and they go, yes, I do. And I'm like, okay, I know what it is now. Do you have this? And it's always the people that tend to fall through the cracks, right? They've often had a lot of scans and imaging and nobody knows what's wrong with them. And that happens a lot. And so it's really interesting. I now know that it was supposed to be integrated. I needed this experience, and I've been told by an astrologer that, actually more than one astrologer, that the day I had my first near death experience, they can see that one in the chart. And I don't remember the date of the second one, so I can't verify it. Because at that point it was just like, okay, it was another experience. I was just having experiences all the time. But anyway, that first experience, because the way the planets were lined up, it was to remind myself of why I had come, and I had to be outside my body in order to understand the connection with the spirit world. It's almost like an initiation, right, where you have to go through that. And then I was sick for all those years. So now all of that has turned into healing, but also it has turned into ancestral healing. So I studied ancestral healing with Mark Valin, who wrote the book, It Didn't Start With You. So he was my teacher. And then I took everything he taught, right, when I took classes with him, and I integrated that into the way I work spiritually with the spirit world at the same time, and somatically. So I developed what I call Kindraya, which is working cognitively, somatically, and spiritually, or superconsciously, where we're using our clairs. Sometimes people don't know when you work with people. They say, I have this issue. I don't know my family. I never met my grandparents. Nobody ever talked about them. So how do we know it's coming from your grandparents? But that's when the superconscious abilities come in. Sometimes I've tuned into the spirit world as a medium, saying, oh, your grandma's here. This is what she's saying. Does this make sense? Or the client themselves often know too, right? Because we are all intuitive creatures.
Mhm.
We just have never been taught how to use it. And so many times we tune in and we sometimes get the same information, which is just incredible. The client who has never been a medium, has never tuned into the spirit world, gets the same information I'm getting. We know it's correct, right? Because we're kind of verifying it. And so a lot of my work now is I work a lot as a medical intuitive and wellness. You don't have to fall through the cracks to work with me that way. You can, sometimes people say, this is what they told me, and they want to pick my brain, or they want to see, are there emotional components to this? Which there often is, right? We're holistic. There is always an emotional component to it. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean that when you solve it emotionally, right? We know that people meditate, people pray, people drink carrot juice and celery juice, whatever. And people say, I know I can heal myself. And it doesn't work for them, right? And so I'm going to say we all have a soul contract too. And maybe you came to heal from the pharmaceutical medicine versus your friend came to heal from the celery juice. And the other friend is here to heal through meditation. We don't know exactly what we incarnated, right? So I tell people, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Use all the tools you have. You know, or try one thing at a time and see which one works. But I tell people, don't put all the eggs in one basket thinking you're going to meditate yourself out of breast cancer, because the best method might be to have surgery, right? And do chemotherapy. And I have lots of friends that have had that, and they're doing amazingly well. Had they chosen celery juice, they might not be here, right? And I've seen people go that route as well, and they don't make it. And but I'm not a cancer doctor, so they're obviously working with oncologists. But the office I worked with had an integrative oncologist, so I could see those people like from a distance, because they're you're also seeing them for something else. But if you're one of those people that are struggling with something, don't don't put all your eggs in one basket. Try all the different things. Meditate, pray, whatever, and work with somebody who can help you with that. So I do a lot of medical intuitive. I do a lot of messages from your spirit guides. And when I do that, I actually draw quickly what I see because I'm mostly clairvoyant. I'm going to say 80 or 90% of my information comes through images, but I also hear, see, and feel. So I'm going to say probably 80% is clairvoyant and the rest is 20%, kind of mixed depending on what it is that I'm doing because certain information comes a certain way. And so that's the messages from spirit guides, and that can often help. When I see the spirit guide, I also know something about the person because
Mhm.
certain spirit guides go along with certain people. So if you came to, start your own business, or if you came to be a healer, or if you came to be a teacher, right? It often comes through when I do messages from spirit guides. And I call it the most fun session. And Wholehearted is also a really fun session. It's a little longer one, but we tune in different ways. Intuitively and spiritually. And then I work a lot with ancestral healing that I originally studied with Mark Lynn. But I tune in differently and I often teach courses. I've taught 3 courses now. I'm at the end of my 3rd course with the Shift Network for those who are familiar with the Shift Network. So I teach for Shift Network as well. And I'm a collaborator with HemiSync as well, too. So
Beautiful.
it's a lot of that. And I have a whole course on the mother wound. It's a 7-hour course that I taught for the Shift Network about a year ago, I think. And I have that one recorded on my website. If you go to the School of Divine Spiritual Lessons on my website, my website is drlottie.com. And it's pre recorded there, so you can just do it at your own pace. But the mother wound is something that's, I'm going to say very common. I'm going to say everybody has a mother wound. Because when I studied ancestral healing, I, that day when he was starting to talk about the mother wound, I said, "Oh, this is going to be such an easy day. I love my mom. I had the best mom. My mom was so wonderful. She was so nurturing. There's no way I have a mother wound." It's really easy to see your mother wound if you know that your mom didn't see you, hear you, or she couldn't be there for you in one way or another. Then you have a mother wound. It's written, the writing is on the wall. But when you have a mom that is very nurturing, I'm going to say the mother wound is more hidden. And we don't see it as easily, right? The nurturing, wonderful mom, you often become a people pleaser, right? You see that a lot. You become the people pleaser, but that people pleaser gets you into a relationship, and then you're not fulfilled in your relationship because you feel like you're never seen and heard in that relationship because you're the people pleaser, because you were taught to be that nurturing, wonderful person who put yourself last and do everything for everybody else first. And those wounds are more hidden, so people tend to get stuck in, I don't understand why my partner, I keep asking him to help me unload the dishwasher, or I keep telling him please take the garbage out, and I have to keep reminding him like he's a child, like I do with my kids. Why can't he just step up to the plate? Well, number one, he was probably not raised to do that, and so it takes time. But that's a mother wound because we're repeating a pattern that our mother also had. That mom was probably also not seen and heard by the partner because they were doing everything for their partner, especially in my era, because I'm in my 60s. So we were all, this whole generation was pretty much taught that, right? So those wounds are a little bit more hidden, and we think that it's the partner's problem, but it's really our problem because we're the people pleaser, right? So there's not an equal give and take in that relationship. So, but the wounds can be anything. But I'm going to say everybody has a mother wound in one way or another, and then there are other things that get passed. That is the traumatic experiences that our ancestors had, the people that came before us, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, aunts, and uncles, the things that they weren't able to resolve. And that's what it gets passed down to the next generation. So
Right.
I love working with all of that as well. And I teach
Mhm.
courses and I work one-on-one.
Yeah. Yep. And I found that through my own journey. A lot of it took me back to my mother and then looking into my family tree.
Mhm.
And whenever I did my own self healing, I could understand how that got that way. And I did the healing on it
Mhm.
and why my life was the way it was cycles and patterns that I
Mhm.
grew up with, inherited. And my relationships were like a mirror to everything that my family lived, and it kind of really made, because at the time before my near-death experience, I couldn't understand why my life was like that. It actually got me to a point where it led me to my near-death experience, and then that helped me get into there, and then go into psychology, and that helped me to understand it. And through that, I've seen people carrying through their DNA. And as I'm getting the information, channeling downloads, I've seen people in the eating disorder population, they were carrying information related to the Holocaust,
Mm-hmm.
starvation. And
Mm-hmm.
I started seeing, making sense and making connections to everything that was going on around me. So I came to that understanding as well. And then
Mm-hmm.
also with the father, I know a lot of it comes from the mother. The father had left our family when I was young, and I didn't know him, but I sought him out. And when I finally met him, like in my 40s, my early 40s, I was like, it was only a couple hours. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I knew everything. I was like,
Yeah.
it makes sense. And then I didn't have the desire to seek him out anymore. Like
Yeah.
it was like this shift just happened and changed
Mm-hmm.
just by meeting him. And I know you kind of talk about, entanglements. Can you
Mm-hmm.
share a little bit about what entanglement is for people who may not understand what that is?
Yeah, so the entanglement, right? We're all connected to each other. We're all entangled. And the people that won the Nobel Prize in physics, I think, was it 2023 or 2024? There were three physicists that won the Nobel Prize. And what they proved was that interconnectivity. So if you have, two particles, and then you have another two particles, but only one particle from each pair meet, the other particles are left behind. But now that those two particles met, the other particles that were left behind that did not meet and were not part of the meeting are now also entangled with each other because they knew that one particle that met the other particle. So think like if two, um, you have two apples in Florida and you have two apples in California, right? On the opposite end of the country, and then one apple from California and one apple from Florida, they meet in Chicago. So we ship one apple. The person in California ship an apple to Chicago, and the person in Florida ships the apple to Chicago. Those two apples are now meeting in Chicago. Well, the apples that are left behind in California and Florida, they are now entangled because they knew that apple that met the other apple in Chicago. And so they're now entangled. So when you think of the physics part, right, and that's exactly what I see when I work with ancestral healing is that miraculous change that happens, right? It's the quantum physics, it's that interconnectedness that we all have. We all have intuition. You walk into a room, you know if somebody is mad. You walk into a room and somebody is very happy, you know that too. You know if somebody's staring at you when you're in a store. You might pick up the phone and call someone, and that person is calling you at the same time because you're thinking of each other, right? We all have intuitive awareness, and it's just a matter of tuning into that. And when we do, we can also see how we are all interconnected, right? So when I work with people, I've had several cases of, they've lost connection, which is a common problem where you lose connection with family members. And I have people that say, I haven't spoken to my daughter in 5 years, or I haven't spoken to my mom in 10 years, right? And we do an ancestral healing and we go through and say, okay, well, it's coming from here, it's coming from here. We do what I call a meditative soul journey, where I guide them on a journey to release what has come up during our conversation. And then, 2 weeks goes by and I get an email and they'll say, you won't believe who just called me. My daughter, who I haven't spoken to in 5 years, just called and she's reaching out and we're reconnecting. This other person hadn't spoken to her mom for 10 years. And then, I don't know, like 6 months or a year went by and she came back and we did another session. And she said, I said, how did it go with your mom? And she goes, oh, yeah, we're best friends now. We talk every day. I mean, the things that happen, those people, right, have no idea of the work that that person is doing. That person, all you have to do is heal yourself. You just can focus on yourself. Forget everybody else. Just focus on yourself, heal your own wounds, because as you heal, that is going to affect all of the people that you know. And we can't, obviously explain it, but this whole quantum physics thing that they won the Nobel Prize for, it makes perfect sense because it's literally what you see when you do this work. And it's, I call it magic. Einstein said spooky action at a distance. I say, no, it's magic at a distance. We just don't know how to explain it yet. Right. But we know, if even from his time, he knew that things were happening, but they couldn't explain it.
Hmm.
So, we're so magical. We're such magical creatures, and we're so intuitive. And it's just a matter for us all to tune into that. We're in an evolution right now. We are here to raise consciousness, right? And have become so much smarter and so much more aware.
Hmm.
And, we're all part of that. We all said, let's go down and be there 2026, right?
Yeah.
We're all here for a reason, and we all have
Yeah.
our own journey.
Yeah. And I noticed as I was doing my own healing work, my outside world changed, the relationships changed. Things happened, things weren't happening anymore, and so that definitely makes sense. And I kind of call it the healing soup, right? So it comes from like past lives, karmic lives, our ancestors.
Hmm.
It's all kind of all together. And then I kind of want to bring in the spirit component here a little bit because from my understanding and what I've been shown is that our souls pre-life planning plan our families, our
Hmm.
experiences. And so that helps our souls evolve, learning the lessons through the personhood, if you will, the human experience. So like we pick our parents based on what the soul wants to learn. And so we may be aware of some of the experiences, some of it not. But sometimes we'll get things that we're like, oh, well, I didn't sign up for this. Why is
Yeah.
this happening? Because it's arising
Yeah.
within from understanding for this ancestral line, right? We
Hmm.
may not have specifically picked that experience, but it's there too. And if it gets triggered, then we have it. And we also
Hmm.
get that. It's like a bonus,
Yeah.
in a sense. Yeah, I kind of look at it as a bonus. But yeah, we can definitely change and, transform our lives, helping heal the lineage as well, because it's like I've been shown that every soul that comes in that takes it up, they're attracted to the certain karmic DNA lessons that we've, as the human form, has been through it. And so they connect with that and they're attracted to it, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a soup. That's how I look at it too, because everything matters, right? We have our soul contract. What did we sign up for in this life, right? That's your movie script. That's your astrological chart. Because so many things I've learned is in my chart that has happened to me, including my near-death experience. So that's like a movie script that's running in the background. And then I'm sure we have the free will. What I'm wearing today, what I'm going to eat today, it's my free will. But I'm going to say the big life lessons are sort of baked into that contract. Who I married, who I had children with. I think, these are things that are predetermined for the lessons that we're signing up for in our life. And everybody said, like the kids say, they chose us as parents because of their lessons, right? And then we have the past lives, like you said, and that we're bringing with us into this life. And and then we have the karmic part that we might have a payoff. One astrologer told me, he looked at my chart and he said, "Oh, you got well when you were 44." And I said, "Wow, yeah, that's pretty spot on." And he goes, I said, "You can see that in my chart?" And he goes, "Yeah, that's when you paid off your past life karma." So to me that makes sense because I paid off my past life karma by suffering and being sick, right? But it also served a purpose in this life for what I incarnated to learn and what I incarnated to do in this life. Because I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if all that hadn't happened, right? I had to have the near-death experience to understand I'm here to work spiritually, but I'm also here as a healer, right? Because I'm a life in numerology, I'm an 11, so I'm here as a healer. And now it all makes sense. So I'm a born medium. I'm here as a healer. I needed the medical degree, but then also I'm working with people spiritually, and it's all in the chart. It's all in the numerology. It's all in my Mayan calendar, right? And when you start looking at all these different things, you can see clearly, okay, this is what I incarnated to do and learn in this life. But, all the little things, you know, that's that's the free will. But I'm going to say all the big things that happen in your life, that's part of the movie script. That's
Mm-hmm.
part of the incarnation, what the soul contract is in this life.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
And so I've also heard some people say, well, I've worked on that and I healed that already, but it's still happening. So what do you feel is going on there?
Yeah, when people say, "Oh, I've already worked on that," or, "I've already tried to heal that, but it's not, I can't get over it," or is that what you're saying? Like they kind of like
Hmm.
get stuck? Yeah. I'm going to say that's great. You did that work. There might be something else you need to do as well. It might be, they might have some kind of a timing in your chart that this is not supposed to release until, July 1st, 2027, right? We don't know what that soul contract is. Just like why I thought that when I was 10 years old that that's it. I'm never going to get well. I'm never going to have a life again. And I started an online business that was 8 years after my first experience. So in 2000, I started an online toy business because I thought, it's been 8 years. I'm never going to be a fully functioning human again. I might as well start some kind of online business. Um, and then all of a sudden I got well. 12 years later, at 10, everything got really well. And by 12, that's it. I'm moving forward with my life. But, sometimes I feel like that's just the timing is not right. Maybe there is something in your soul contract that says you're not supposed to get well yet. Or this is a lifelong journey where you're going to ride a roller coaster. You're going to be, feeling better, then you're going to feel worse. We don't know exactly what you incarnated, but, unless you find an astrologer that's really good and can read between the lines, you might be able to get some help. But I'm going to say sometimes, it might not have been the right thing to try. But I think the one thing that's dangerous is that people start gaslighting themselves or their friends are gaslighting them, not knowing, saying, "Oh, well, you just didn't pray hard enough. You just didn't meditate hard enough. You just need to do this class. You're not doing it right." Like people, they're being gaslit. But I'm going to say, let all of that go. You're on your own path, your own journey. We don't know what's going to make you heal, or if you are even ever going to be 100% well, right? And now there are people that's going to argue everything is possible. And I used to say that everything is possible. Everybody can heal if you just do it right. But then I became a doctor, and I'm going to say that it's not true because I've seen too many people that do absolutely everything in their power, the brightest, kindest, wonderful people, and they still don't heal because it wasn't supposed to happen, right? And I'm going to say that's just how it is. And I've had a couple of experiences like that. Um, right after I got out of med school, it really started the hype up, and I had a man come into the clinic for allergies. He was in his early 70s. He was tall and skinny, looked like he was in perfect health, honestly. So I said, "Oh, you came in." I was like, I'm listening to his lungs. I spent an hour with this man. Okay. I went through his entire history. I'm like, this man came in, and I'm also new out of med school. I'm in residency. So I'm like, really, I'm going to figure it out. Right. So I go through his entire history, and he has this little tickle cough. And I'm like, anybody else would have said, "Okay, well, try this allergy medication and see, come back in a week if it's not better." Right. Because I listened to his lungs. I couldn't even hear anything. And I have a really good stethoscope. And I also have asthma, and one of my kids had asthma. And so I am used, my dad taught me to listen to my own lungs and my children's lungs long before I went to med school. So I would know if I had pneumonia or not. So I'm very used to listening to the lungs for any little crackle. There was nothing to be heard in this man's lungs. And he had had cancer when he was in his 20s, like late 20s. He had a cancer that had metastasized to the lungs, and he had received radiation at the time. And I said, and then he had not had any problems his whole life, and the man is in his 70s. So I said, with this history, even though it's a tickle cough and I can't hear anything, but when he walked through my door, I heard lung cancer. The spirit world said lung cancer. So I'm like going through the whole history, trying to figure out. is this true spirit world, right? Because I was still checking, is this true? It's one thing to get messages for myself, but it's another to get messages about a patient. And I'm a doctor now. I got to practice under the law, under my license. I can't rely on what the spirit world's telling me. I got to find it. I got to do the labs. I got to do the imaging. I got to figure out, is there any truth to this message? So I told him, I said, with your history, you had this spots on your lungs when you were young. How do you feel about doing an X-ray so we can just make sure that there's nothing going on? He said, yeah, I think that would be wise. We do an X-ray, comes back possible cancer. Handed it over to the oncologist in the clinic because you can't treat cancer patient if you're a general practitioner. You have to send them on to a specialist. And literally, that man passed away, I think within 3 months, like it was weeks. He was the caretaker of his wife that had dementia and like Alzheimer's. And so it gave him time by finding out that diagnosis, it gave him time to put all his paperwork together, get care, get somebody to come in, take care of his wife. And then he checked himself into hospice and he was gone literally in 3 months. And I was so upset because I was studying mediumship at orthopedic in college, and I was telling my teachers, why does the spirit world tell me what the patient has, and then I can't fix it, right? Because I became a doctor so I could help people heal. And they just said, well, why do you think that is? And I said, so I would listen. And they said, yep, that's it. You have to listen. You have to always listen. So, and that was kind of the beginning of me working as a medical medium or a medical intuitive. So I always get messages. So it doesn't matter if I work with someone and I say, no, just tell me what's going on because I'm talking to the spirit world at the same time. And you can, I had a client once who said, she had a lot of food allergies and like IBS and things like that. And I said, I'm not getting that. I understand those are your symptoms. These are what people have told you. But the spirit world keeps telling me you have endometriosis. And she just looks at me and she goes, I did. I have endometriosis. They did surgery for that. And I said, yeah, but it's still there. What surgery did you have? And then that was actually the problem. And that's what caused all the food allergies and her bowel issues.
Mm.
So it's really interesting, right? Because now I get it. I understand why I had to get the degree because I'm helping all those people that can't be helped by people who are not or does not have that background, right? And so now I can help people find, the right people. It doesn't matter where they live in the world because I can guide them and say, you need to find somebody that does this. You can go here, join this group. They will have that information for you in your country, right? And guide them to the right people. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's really
Yeah.
interesting, right? But the thing is, we are all guided and we just don't know it. If we're not working with it or we're not intuitive or we didn't, talk to the spirit world or have a near-death experience. But we're all intuitive creatures and it's just a matter, for all of you listening, start listening to all those little things you get guided, the bird that lands on your windowsill, the license plate that tells you something that you needed to hear that day. These are all things that come forward to guide you along your way.
Mhm. Yeah. And I love that you say that, like with the healing, maybe this lifetime it wasn't meant to be healed. Maybe it wasn't
Mhm.
because Spirit has told me that um, basically nothing is wasted.
Yeah.
Everything is accounted for. And so it may not have been you that's going to heal it in this lifetime, and it's the next soul that's going to come in that is your child that's going to heal it. And so we don't
Hmm.
have to heal everything in this one lifetime. It
Hmm.
is spread out amongst all of our generations, and it can take lot of generations, for to heal it. And so we don't want to be responsible for everything, but do what we came in to do our own share. And I loved when Spirit told me that. And I was like, because I was like on a whole 10-year spree of like healing this, healing that. And they were like, slow down.
Yeah.
I was healing a lot of stuff, but yeah. And then the things that you were just talking about kind of happened to me too. Like I was being told when people were going to transition, I'm like, why are you telling me this when I can't do anything? You know,
Yeah.
the first time
Yeah.
that happened to me for 2 weeks, I was so sad. I was like, what am I supposed to do with this information? Am I supposed to tell them? Or what am I supposed to do?
Mhm.
And there's nothing I could do. Maybe I can make, because in that profession,
Hmm.
psychology, counseling, you got to be careful what you're doing, like
Yeah.
what you're saying in your role,
Yeah.
because they don't allow for certain things. And yeah, it was
Mhm.
just very heartening to not say
Yeah.
that to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes it, like we said, it's not supposed to be healed yet. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, I tell people don't ever give up because we don't know. Maybe you are the one who's going to have a miraculous healing. I had a miraculous healing. Right. And, I've seen a lot of people have miraculous healings.
Mm-hmm.
What is that? I'm going to say that's what's supposed to happen. And we don't know. It could be you. It's just not happening yet. So, don't ever give up.
Right.
Always, always keep trying different things. Always keep working at it because all of a sudden, I mean, I pretty much had given up too. I'm like, that's it. Like I'm just going to be sick for the rest of my life is what it is. And then I got well, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just, and I've seen that happen to other people too. So, if you're out there struggling, don't give up. Just know it might just not be the time yet.
Right.
All right. You might
Beautiful.
have to have this condition until, March 3rd, 2028. And then all of a sudden things shift. Or there's a
Yeah.
new treatment that comes out and that's the one that's going to fix you. Right. And just keep working, keep your hope up, and keep doing all the different things you can to,
Mhm.
support yourself and support your journey.
Yeah, exactly. And it may just be that you're going to meet a person and your souls just need to meet and then it's going to
Yeah.
heal. We never really know, that's the
Mhm.
magic of it.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's, yeah. Yeah. And like kind of now, like I'm kind of going through this situation now where I'm having what medically they term as like a frontal lobe epilepsy
Uh-huh.
scenario where I'm seeing like a past life. I'm feeling
Hmm.
like deja vu. Kind of feeling this uprising. You probably have heard of it. I don't know. But those symptoms, but then my vision hurts and this side of my head hurts. I feel like I was clobbered over the head. So I'm like, okay, is this past life? Is this something that's from my ancestral, background, or I'm just trying to navigate it. And then with my vision, because my vision just started this last year,
Hmm.
it was fine until then, and then it just hit me. So yeah, it's just diving in and trying to work on it, and uh,
Yeah,
do the
exactly.
work.
We're all guided, and sometimes we go through these periods of weird things. I used to think I had like seizures, and then I figured out I had Kundalini. It's like my whole body would shake, and like, I would just like meditate in bed. And I mean, it started a long time ago. It used to just be these rushes up my spine, but then I would literally jerk. Oh my gosh, almost once a minute for an hour. This was a few years ago. It was crazy, and but I also had it was I would start seeing past lives, like you. So it's really interesting, and I call them the upgrades now. So if that happens, and I have like a Kundalini period, it seems to be I go through periods with Kundalini, and it's more, but there's always something that comes through. So all of a sudden, I get more information about a past life, or my abilities get better, or I don't know. I feel like I don't know. It's like a computer upgrade. And we
Mm-hmm.
all get computer upgrades, right? But the people might not have Kundalini, but all of a sudden you have this epiphany and like, wow, now I know how to do this, right? It's almost like we also get upgrades, like from the universe. Who knows how it works? But,
Mm-hmm.
as we move through life, our software within us and the way we think and the way our awareness, right? So when we look back 20 years, who was I 20 years ago? I was somebody very different from the person I am today,
Mm-hmm.
and those are all the little upgrades along the way. So I always
Yeah.
joke like, okay, now I'm on the software 26.1 now. Next year I'll be 27.3. But we keep getting our little like software upgrades, and I think for me it has coincided with my Kundalini experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
yeah, but we're
definitely.
you know we're all magical creatures, so can't
Yeah.
emphasize that enough. How magical we all are, and the people that are listening that, say, "Oh, I wish I could have a near-death experience." I'm going to tell you that all you have to do is start meditating. The more you meditate, every medium I have ever met, and it's hundreds of them at Arthur Findlay College, how do they become a medium? They meditate every single day. And that is how we learn to connect with the spirit world. And there's most mediums. are not have not had a near death experience. I'm the only one of all the hundreds of people I have met. I am the only one that I know of that went to Arthur Findlay College. Everybody else has not had a near death experience. All they did was meditate, and then they started hearing the spirit world. So, don't
Hmm.
think that you have to have a near death experience to become spiritual or hear the spirit world. All you have to do is meditate.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Exactly. And yeah, I went to Arthur Finley and I love that. I loved it there. It was amazing. I went for 2 weeks for trance healing
Hmm.
course. So that was amazing experience. And just as we want to kind of, I want to kind of bring this to a close. So with the collective shift we're going through, I kind of look at it as, everybody's going through shifting and healing and transformation right now. So, even if you're not really doing the healing or going on the healing journey, there's also shifts going on for them as well, that having to do the healing work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
We're in a like a consciousness evolution period
Yeah.
where we're all starting to tune in and becoming more consciously aware of
Hmm.
everything. So,
Yeah. There's a lot of people out there standing up and doing, just doing something simple like that, helping
hmm
somebody, that makes a
hmm
big difference in the world, kind of like with the grid that you were talking about.
hmm
Yeah. So if
yeah,
somebody wanted to make change in the world, what is the best way that they can do that?
to make a change in the world, I'm going to say heal yourself. Heal
Beautiful.
yourself because that's all you have to do is just focus on yourself. If you heal yourself and heal your own wounds, you are already making a change. So, and then for people who want to do other things, I'm going to say, follow your heart desire, whether that is, helping animals or helping people, or even just being kind to people, holding up the door at the grocery store. Everything makes a difference because, letting somebody pass in front of you, when you're driving, because everybody has struggles in the world, and maybe you just smiling at someone, holding up the door, or saying have a nice day, it might save that person's life. You don't know if they're suicidal, you don't know what they're going through. So I'm going to say just being kind to people and being kind to yourself is going to make the whole planet a better place.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lottie. Where can people, I know you kind of mentioned it before, where can people reach out to if they wanted to find out more about you or set up a session?
Yeah, so my website is Dr. Lottie, so DrLotte.com. So drlottie.com. And everything is on my website. The best way to stay up to date is to go there and sign up for my email list so that you get notified if I teach courses or I'm doing a retreat or anything like that. And you can also see all the sessions I offer on my website, as well as book a session if you feel called to working with me one on one. And under my the School of Divine Spiritual Essence, that's where you will find my course to connecting with your spirit guides and my course to heal your mother wound.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for everything that you do.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.